Really feeling fear that the next round won't work. Will I ever be a mother? Will we ever be parents?
We only wanted to do that one more time. I'm Gavin.
This could take a while.
I'm Gavin and this is Eli.
And I'm Lauren and this is Jude, and this is the story of our experience at ARGC.
We were diagnosed with unexplained infertility in 2018 after lots of testing. We first went on a pill called Clomid for 6 months through the NHS, which unfortunately didn't work, so we were then referred for IVF. We had IVF via the NHS at a clinic, and then we unfortunately had a failed round there. We then went privately and had 3 more transfers, so 4 in total, none of which worked.
This is a classic example of the type of patient that we frequently get at the clinic here. Multiple failures elsewhere, possibly a mixture of fresh and frozen, meaning that they don't appear to have a problem with the embryo quality. But despite the fact of the embryos being good quality, they don't achieve a pregnancy.
The mindset when a transfer doesn't work is you think everything's gone, everything that you were trying to achieve all of a sudden has been ripped away. It's obviously very emotional and very hard point to go through. We were quite good at talking about our feelings, how we felt, what we wanted to do next, what we didn't want to do next, and that's almost a harder conversation because as a couple you've got to agree what to do as a team.
I found that once a transfer had failed, I often had a couple of days of really feeling fear that the next round won't work, or will I ever be a mother? Will we ever be parents? Will it ever happen for us? And that's the emotion I really struggled with. But as Gavin said, we kind of talked through that, we processed that together, we spoke to people, friends, family, and that helped. I also found a lot of comfort in following people on social media who had gone through a similar experience and had multiple failures previously and have then gone on to have success stories, and that gave me a lot of hope. So I just put all my energy into basically holding on to that hope. That was basically all we did every time.
Offering those patients just IVF without trying to investigate the condition further is no different from what they are capable of achieving themselves, because those patients are probably creating embryos all the time. They're not pregnant, so to do IVF and just create more embryos is not really the solution for those kind of problems. The primary problem is normally what happens next. It's not actually the embryo itself, it's actually whether the body is prepared to look after the embryos. This is where the treatment and the assistance will make a big difference.
So we did our research and we decided that to go through an egg collection is obviously a huge undertaking. So we only wanted to do that one more time. So we did our research as to what we thought would be the best clinic and to go with, and chose ARGC as a result, and very pleased with our choice.
Yeah.
When we decided to give it one last go, we wanted to maximise our chances of success. So we very much were driven by what clinic has got the top rates. We found the data on the HFEA website.
Yeah.
HFEA website. Sorry, I got distracted. Let me start again. It's quite easy with you, isn't it, Pickle?
We've been able to help a lot of people where maybe the traditional treatment didn't help them before. That's why we strongly believe, based on our experience and what we have seen here over almost 20 years, that implantation problem is really important, particularly in the patients that have been diagnosed with unexplained infertility, more so if they are young, because definitely the problem is not the embryos, it's actually what happens next when the embryos go back into the body.
When we were looking for our next clinic to go to, we very much in our minds thought this was going to be our last go at it. We did our research online, and we found ARGC as one of the top, or if not the top, clinic in terms of success rates in the country. So we thought, well, if it's our last and go at it, let's go there.
Another thing I found really helpful, again on the social media side of things, was I tried to find people online who had previously had experience or were currently at ARGC as patients, and spoke to them, and kind of just got some honest reviews about things, and nobody could speak more highly of ARGC than those people.
And even those who had not necessarily been successful or were still in treatment and
It wasn't looking so good for them, still said they didn't regret going to ARGC because it was the best place for them. So that was really positive, because we wanted to know that whatever the outcome, we would have been happy that we'd chosen this place, which of course we are.
The clinic's approach is very different, and that was something we had to get our minds around quite early on, that the first month or so is very intensive. There's a lot of appointments, there's a lot of testing, there's a lot of medication involved. But that was something that was very different in choosing ARGC compared to the other clinics that we'd used in the past. But ultimately, that rigour and attention to everything is why we're sat here with 2 babies.
Those patients, the primary problem is not in the embryos. They probably create embryos themselves all the time, so they don't need to come and pay anybody thousands of pounds to create embryos, which they are capable of creating. So there's no reason to, and I think that's the problem, because when people try for a number of years and they've done all the tests and all the tests are normal, people just offer them IVF. I don't know why, because to me, it doesn't really add anything to their situation. And you could see, like for in this couple, okay, they've created I don't know how many embryos. They had 6 attempts, 4 fresh, 2 frozen, possibly in excess of 10 embryos going back, not a single one implanted. And they probably have also another 10 or 15 or 20 embryos over the course of the 2 years that they've been trying. They didn't get pregnant. So unless you try and look into something else, it's very clearly, the case is very clear that, okay, there is something else that's not the embryo.
It was described as an IVF boot camp, so I knew kind of what I was going into, and obviously following our consultation, we knew what to expect to a certain degree. It was busy, there were lots of blood tests, procedures, but every step of the way, the staff were incredible at literally and metaphorically holding your hand. No question was too silly, and I was just felt fully supported. So although it was a lot and very different to the previous experience where I was just given some drugs to take and I took them, this time round those drugs were altered. There were phone calls every day, so it was tailored directly to my body and what my body was doing. Regular scans to see how things were going, and so I felt all the way through that we were just going to have the best chance at success. So having been diagnosed with unexplained infertility, we really weren't sure what it was that meant that our transfers weren't working. I certainly believe there was something that happened after transfer that wasn't happening, so implantation for some reason wasn't happening. There was certainly something to be said for how individual the STIMS process was, but we'd always got quite good embryos. It was just following transfer, nothing ever happened.
For the last 20 years, since about 2002, because 80% of the patient, if not more, that come to our clinic are actually patients with similar histories. They failed repeatedly elsewhere. And we started looking into the implantation potential of those patients, and we started doing extra tests, which are collectively referred to as the immune test, which is basically looking at a mixture of the natural killer cells, cytokines, and similar things. And most of those patients, they normally have high levels or abnormal levels.
When we had the immune treatment in our first set of immunes in our monitoring cycle, they came back normal. But after having the embryo transfer, we only ever see slightly, wasn't it, with NK cells, but I had high cytokines. So I had to have an immune drip. And that was basically my body's response to having 2 foreign objects put back into it.
The best way to really have a success with those patients is to try and focus on bringing those levels down. And it's a mixture of either a combination of injections, maybe steroids, maybe anticoagulant. There is no one treatment that fits everybody. I think that the treatment has to be tailored to the patient.
So by having the drip, that lowered those NK cells and cytokines and allowed my body to implant these 2 little cherubs. And we continued with that immunes testing, sent those bloods off every 3 weeks, I think for quite a long time, wasn't it? Certainly into the sort of start of the second trimester. And then we had, I think, 2 more drips after that. And then after that, it was fine. So the pregnancy was able to continue.
It's a long journey, and those patients actually achieving a pregnancy with them is not actually the end of the journey. It's actually the beginning of a long journey, because they need to be monitored very, very carefully throughout most of the pregnancy, which is something we offered here because we know that they still need to be looked after and the medication adjusted accordingly.
I think that combined with having the progesterone injections and the blood thinning injections, that all ultimately has led to it being successful.
It's really hard to pinpoint what the key to success is. All we know is the process at ARGC from start to finish was very different, and it was successful for us.
And immunes testing was something that was never discussed in any of our other clinics. It was something that actually the NHS said to us that they'd heard of but kind of didn't really have much evidence behind. But we had watched the YouTube videos with Dr. T talking through them and understood where he was coming from and that it was actually a perfectly safe thing to have done. And we trusted the process all the way through. And when they came back as elevated, I thought, well, maybe that's why things hadn't worked for us previously. So we were definitely going to go down that route.
Starting a pregnancy, again, for those patients, it's not the end of the road. I mean, you still need to monitor them very carefully because they will still be at a much higher risk of miscarriage. And that's why you need to look at the medication, adjust the medication, and the follow-up of those patients extends till near the delivery date, which we offer here because we believe that to finish the service and to finish the journey that we have started, we need to look into their levels. And we're probably in a better place than maybe other people to offer them this kind of service.
We decided in the run-up to starting with ARGC to put together an Instagram account to act as a journal for our journey. We thought other people would learn a lot from an honest account of how this stuff works, because there's not an awful lot out there from people who have been through it, understandably, because it's an incredibly intimate and potentially painful process. But we just thought, regardless of our outcome, it would be helpful for people to know how it worked and to raise awareness.
But through that, we've just made some friends, which is odd because some of these people I've never met, but we've shared stories, sort of laughed together and cried together.
What was really interesting was towards the end of the process, we had this army of people behind us. Like I could always tell if I was at work when Lauren would put a post up because my phone would just be like bzz, 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 for like a good hour, and it would just be all these messages and well wishes coming through.
I had one lady who I've never met saying, I've just cried seeing your post that you were pregnant and I've had to leave the office and everyone's asking me what's happening. And she said, I had to explain that somebody I've never met on social media has found out she's pregnant and I just need some time to process it, which I thought was lovely. So yeah, people really got on board.